Thank you for having me.
We know our government goes and takes its instructions from organisations like the World Economic Forum on an annual basis. They're told to put certain procedures and protocols into place in terms of migration, in terms of climate control, which have a hugely negative impact on the country. And it doesn't seem to bother them. They seem to have come to the conclusion that it doesn't really matter what the elections say anymore. It's going to be the same policies that are being implemented anyway, whether it's a Marxist party like Sinn Féin, or whether it's a party like Fine Gael, which is equally Marxist, but just tries to cover it a bit better and pretends to be a conservative party. I think you'll find the same in Britain. You have a conservative party, but they're not a conservative party, not with a small c. Is there going to be any significant difference between the policies implemented by the Conservatives and the Labour Party in Britain? Probably not. Certainly not in terms of the woke agenda, certainly not in terms of the sexualisation and manipulation of our children. There's a whole range of issues there that seem to be above politics now, but they're the key issues that affect people's lives.
So who is to blame when it comes to this mass migration here in Ireland? Who's orchestrated this? Who has the power to stop it, but more importantly, is allowing it to happen?
Well, look, obviously the government of Ireland is to blame, and I think the people for not holding them to account. I think the government of Ireland enjoys virtuous signalling on this matter of immigration. When the border dispute or the war broke out between Ukraine and Russia, Ireland immediately leapt into the fray and undertook that there would be no cap on the number of Ukrainian immigrants or refugees who could be brought into Ireland. We also assumed this would be a figure of maybe 10 or 15,000, but it very quickly accelerated to over 100,000, an enormous figure in terms of our previous historical precedent in Ireland. In addition, the Irish government has made no provision for adequate accommodation. Our tourism industry has been destroyed by this. They have made no provision whatever for determining whether the people who show up here are genuinely from Ukraine. Many of them are not from Ukraine. Many of those who come from Ukraine go home for their holidays for Christmas, go home to get their teeth done. They drive very fancy jeeps. Many of them run businesses still in Ukraine. Remember, Ukraine is a very, very corrupt country. Many people are bailing out of that country. They're making use of the facilities that they will get in Ireland. The government really has no interest in dealing with this problem. I think the government has a long-term strategy that Ireland needs to be made a multicultural state, and that must be done very, very rapidly. The dangers of that clearly are shown by history. When a particular population is supplanted and is replaced, there tends to be violence, there tends to be very serious social strife. And I think we will be getting to that stage in Ireland fairly soon.
So having landed in Dublin, driven around Naas, Kilkenny, Cork, Mallow, Roscrea, now I'm here on the outskirts of Limerick, I'm seeing that there's migrants dotted everywhere, and in some small towns there's quite a large number. How many are in Ireland, and how is it distributed?
At present, the numbers in Ireland are approximately 20% of the overall population has been born outside of Ireland. That's probably an underestimate, because the great majority of people, this is based on census figures, and many people who are here illegally, of course, will not fill out a census form. Even within that, if you look at particular age cohorts, if you look at the key age cohort between, say, 19 and 35, it's approximately 33%. So a third of the people in that key demographic, the working age, the reproductive age demographic, is at least 33%, probably somewhat more. It's less for kids under 15, on the basis, of course, that a lot of kids are now born here, first generation. If you take first generation kids into account, you're probably looking at a situation where Ireland is very close to 50-50.
Quite a few people on my Twitter account have asked how people are actually getting to Ireland, because it's not like with France and Germany, where, if you are committed enough, you could walk to those countries.
We have signed up to the International Asylum Protocol, implemented in 1951 and updated in 1967, which is no longer fit for purpose. It was introduced at a time before cheap air travel. People now show up here, they get on a flight in Hamburg or wherever, they arrive in Germany from someplace, and they transit. They arrive here they get on their plane with passports, they arrive without passports. As I said, I've spoken to many aircraft maintenance people in Shannon Airport, which is quite close to where I live, And they tell me their biggest job always is cleaning out the toilets from the passports that have been flushed down them. 80% of asylum seekers arrive here without documentation. This is good. And they arrive not from the country from which they claim to be fleeing. They arrive from other European countries. We don't have a direct flight to Somalia, but somehow we have a huge number of Somalians, a huge number of Georgians here. Many of them involved in criminality, many of them very, very dodgy people, not the kind of people you want to introduce into your country. But that's how they get here, and the government seems to have no interest in adopting a proper deportation or hearing system. France deports some 92% of its asylum seekers. Ireland issues deportation orders against approximately 8% of people, and none of them are implemented. We deport very few people.
Deportation here is actually optional, really, is it?
They will issue a deportation order, but nobody chases it up.
So
they
say you're being deported,
yeah, but
then it's simply up to you to leave.
It's up
And
to
if you don't want to,
yeah. Well, if you can hide, well, you probably cease getting social welfare. But if you're working for cash in a restaurant or something, then you're still there. And eventually, if you say, well, I've been here 10 years now, they'll probably give you citizenship. You know, they'll reward you for gaming the system.
how bad's the crime now? Because I was in Fermoy yesterday with Derek Bly, and he was talking to me about how rapes are very rare there. Yet in the past year, they have increased, and there is a common perpetrator.
There have been some very, very high-profile criminal cases. There was a young woman, Ashley Murphy, was murdered very brutally last year. The feminist mob immediately went on the warpath and were blaming all Irish men, and were saying that Irish men shouldn't be allowed out in the streets without a licence or without sensitivity training. And then they found out it was a migrant who had killed her, and immediately the hysteria stopped. You know, that story was off the page because it was not one of the feminist hate figures that was found to have been guilty. It was somebody else. There was another case of a Muslim fanatic who decapitated two homosexual men, and that they tried to turn that around to being Irish hate crime against homosexuals, but it wasn't Irish. It was obviously a migrant who had done it. But nevertheless, the left will always use these events to try to introduce more draconian control and more authoritarianism, and they'll always target the wrong people. They will never target Islamic fanatics or Islamic fundamentalist groups. You know, the whole process of the left is to denigrate the native culture, to make people feel guilty when they have no reason to feel guilty, and to use the crimes of the people that they bring in as a means of attacking the native population. It's very sad. I think people are waking up to it, but perhaps too late.